All right, welcome back, everybody. This is Man Uncaved podcast, and I am your host, Shane Coyle. I was told a while ago we get here in relation and we heal in relation. Well, let's unpack that tonight a little bit, and of course, why it is important that as we are doing our healing journey, that we support ourselves with like minds, potentially minds, people that are on the same path as ourselves, and why there is this constant reflector that comes back within these communities that allows us to get to see ourselves. Just like any other relationship, right? If you're looking at it from the romantic relationship lens, there's a reflector coming back. You're seeing your shadows, how your shadows are engaged with each other. And so stepping outside of that, looking at from a support group lens, potentially if working with men, having healthy men on this path, and the importance is because you're also getting that reflector back. And it's the reciprocation that is very important within the healing dynamics of that. And so let's first jump into, we get here in relation, let's get to that first part before we get to we heal in relation. Because the understanding, obviously, and a lot of the work that I'm really doing is these underlying experiences related to narratives, related to childhood experience, related to belief systems, and those become these imprints of our life. I think we kind of have an understanding of that. If you're listening to this podcast, you probably have that already known, that early experiences definitely do lead to adult life, relationships, adult life, maladaptive behaviors, as they would say. I don't think that's not known at this point. That is this idea we get here in relations. These experiences, again, become these imprints of our life. We've talked about it in past episodes, and these belief systems that we create based on those. We internalize things from that lens. And the way that we can create that shock to that system is we start to move and we navigate into healing environments outside that are doing this work so we can have the reflector. I once heard this story. You know me, I love my stories because it kind of gives a visual of this certain understanding of things. And again, we're storytellers. There is these two elderly fish, and they're going upstream. And going downstream are two young fish. And the elderly fish look over to the young fish going downstream and say, "How's the water?" The young fish look to the elderly and say, "Great." And as they pass by, and later on the one young fish looks to the other young fish and says, "What's water?" And I think that tells and kind of displays a little bit of this understanding that we don't understand that we might be exhibiting certain patterns in our life stemming from belief systems or early imprints unless we're put in a position to get that reflection back. And why it's so important, when I was leading a group one time, a gentleman was communicating about stuff in his own childhood. Maybe there was some yelling going on, some doors slamming. And this other gentleman on the other side of the room was kind of like shocked, and he goes, "Oh, wait, that's not normal?" Reality kind of hit him that, hey, it's like a fish in a fishbowl. He's like, what is water? He didn't understand that wasn't normal. All we have as a reference point is our own experience. Until we get outside of our own experience, we hear other stories of what their maybe experience was like. Then we see like, oh, wait, maybe that had an impact. Maybe it had a bigger impact than I knew. The door slamming or not being emotionally met or whatever the story is. And so that's that idea of we get here in relation. And again, just to bring it to a wider lens, the micro, macro. So if you look at it on a macro lens, environmental factors, there's big relation. We are always in relation. I mean, let's just keep it simple. We're always relation with people, places, and things constantly. So stepping outside of the family system, looking at it from a macro lens, environmental factors, we're always in relationship to our environmental factors. That can also leave big, huge imprints. And I think Karen Horney says, these internal conflicts she would talk about in the development of a human being. And we meet many of them, right? Obviously, we meet the early childhood experiences, and those can create conflicts that we might have to overcome. We can meet in the adolescent stage where we have to meet some of those conflicts and overcome those. So when we're looking at parts or we're looking at healing, we're looking at all these different developmental stages. It's not just childhood, although that leaves the most lasting imprint, the big one, because you're seeing how relationships are, you're seeing the imprint of what relationships look like, you're seeing the imprint of what love looks like. Belief systems start to happen. The child at this very formative age, young, early age, is the most neurons is happening in this developmental stage. They believe they triple neurons. The most neurons they'll do their whole life is in this very early ages. So it leaves lasting imprints, belief systems, subconscious, unconscious. So that's that idea of we get here in relation and how we heal in relation. And that's the idea of stepping outside of the fishbowl, recognizing there's more. And how do we do that? We hear it in other people's. We're getting the reflection to recognize our own journey. And then within those types of communities, and this is why I have to reiterate the importance of finding these communities as men, because one thing that I know as a man from my family system, but also from society, is to repress my feelings, push them down, man up, whatever these beliefs and messages that we have received as men, we're not allowed to show them. And so it becomes really deeply suppressed within us. So in these communities, we're allowed to finally be. I think what ends up happening is with those suppressing of those emotional experiences, good, bad, whatever you want to label them, just feelings in themselves and emotions, it just leaves us with no outlet to express them. They become explosive in ways. They become passive-aggressive in ways. We've talked about they become addictive behavior patterns away because we don't know how to sit with the discomfort of owning those things because we have neglected them for so long. We have neglected our own needs, maybe. We've neglected our own feelings for so long. So it just becomes that habitual pattern. And then the fear and then the stigma, of course, lies as men who show emotions or maybe cry. It's much more acceptable for a man to be angry than for a man to cry in some settings. I'm not saying in all settings, but in definitely some settings. Again, the importance of community. In full disclosure, I'll just express for my own self. I had such fear of working with men. Again, I've mentioned I was molested by a man. I was abandoned by a man. All of these things that had happened in my life have caused me to live in fear. Again, we get here in relation. So there it is. There is that all this conditioning, the imprints left me very scared to work with men because the fear was you're going to leave me. You're going to hurt me. You're going to, neglect me. All of that fear prevented me from seeking connection to other men. And where I met my emotional connection was through women. Now, that could also be problematic as a man. I am more willing and have been able to act out sexually, using sex as a mechanism to get my emotional needs met, obviously hurting people along the way, to get my worth, using sex to feel in control in my life. And obviously hurting people along the way. It was very self-seeking. What I learned to do got invited to a men's retreat. And of course, I say go big or go home, not a small men's retreat. There was 50 men. It was a big retreat. But I got invited from another brother of mine who was already kind of doing men's work. He says, we got to dive into this. And there I was surrounded by men who were able to be vulnerable, to share their own stories of molestation, of maybe, father wounds, of being abandoned by their father, and so on and so on. So there was this shared relatedness that I was able to move into, which created such deep healing. So that is the component of we heal in relation and the power within the community. And so this is Man Uncaved's podcast. Again, my name is Shane. This one is the importance of surrounding yourself with community that can hold you. And the reason why they can hold you in your healing journey is because they are also either healing and holding themselves or learning how to hold themselves. And we get this mirror reflection back. Such a powerful thing that I had to learn. Obviously, through my story I just told you, was a challenge at first. I had such resistance to leaning into men. And what I have truly found is such great refuge with leaning in with other men, sharing our stories, finding similarities. So I want to also give you this little plug. I have Man Uncaved on Instagram. That is man_uncaved. In the bio, you will see a link to what is called The Gathering. That is a free monthly online men's group. We sit there via Zoom, so you can be wherever you are, plug in, we gather, we support each other. The great paradox is, in order to maintain these gifts of healing, of transformation, you must give them away. There's no need to hoard them only for yourself. We need to give them away. And as you start to see this support and the group really shows up, the men really show up for each other to support each other, that is how we maintain our own gifts. Again, my name is Shane. This is Man Uncaved Podcast. We need to come out of hiding.